My name is Sam Zhao, and the Director of Center for China-U.S. Cooperation at Joseph Corbell School here. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our Jackson Hole China Forum. As always, I want to take this opportunity to thank Bill Jackson and Diana Lee for their support to this forum. Bill is not here today, so Diana is here. So please join me to thank Diana for her support. It's my really great honor today. We have a very distinguished scholar from Davidson College, Shelley Rieger, Professor Shelley Rieger. Davidson College, I don't know if everyone knows, that is very, very top, very, very elite, very, very selective liberal arts college in this country, ranking within top 20 of the small liberal arts colleges, because I also taught at one of those liberal arts colleges, Kobe College, many, many years ago. So I have kind of passion for this type of liberal arts colleges, which give very, very good education to students. Professor Shelley Rieger is one of the very, very top scholars in this country working on the Taiwan issues. She has an undergraduate degree from Princeton University, a PhD from Harvard. Those are the places we would dream our kids can get into. And then she has held a Brown professorship at Davidson College and has published a lot of books and articles on Taiwan's international status, and also on China. In fact, today she will talk the topic Why Taiwan Matters, which is also a topic, the title of one of the most recent books, and which is in display in the back and also on sale. So if you are interested, you are more than welcome to purchase the book, which I think was a really good book. And I'm sure she will be happy to put her signature of that on the book and after the talk. So without further ado, please join me to welcome Professor Shelley Rieger.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to try to stand up and just talk loudly, but if those of you in the back want me to pick up this microphone, just make a little way. It's a real pleasure to be here. Such a beautiful day. I can't believe all you people are sitting inside. And they tell me this is like the last nice day before winter begins. So maybe I should give you 20 seconds to make a run for the exits on that note. All right then, here we are. So yes, thank you so much, and thank you for your introduction, Sam. You're really lucky to have this center within the Corbell School, and lucky to have a director who is so well connected, well versed, and expert in the field of Chinese politics and Chinese studies, and also can provide such wonderful leadership in bringing in a diversity of programs with a diversity of points of view. So I really appreciate your encouragement, and I hope they all know how fortunate they are to have you, and also to have the support of your funders, the Jackson Hole Foundation. So my topic today is why Taiwan matters, and I realize that that's a pretty kind of almost a polemical title, right? Usually people who want to answer a question like that start with the question. They don't start with the answer. But I believe that Taiwan does matter, and that I don't need to answer the question whether it does or not. But I think increasingly now in the United States in particular, in the world in general, we need to articulate the case for why Taiwan matters. So the argument I want to make for you today is that Taiwan matters to others, but more importantly, ultimately, it matters to itself, and we ought to be cognizant and acknowledge the degree to which all nations, all peoples, whether you want to call Taiwan a nation or not is already entering into troubled waters, but all peoples have the right to be treated as ends in themselves and not merely as means to the ends of others. So the case I want to make is that Taiwan matters to us, it matters to the People's Republic of China, it matters to the world, but also, and very significantly, it matters to itself. So where is Taiwan? You are in a school of international affairs, so you know the answer, but just to make sure, Taiwan is in the Pacific Ocean off the southern coast of China, and it has long been known to Westerners by the name Formosa, which comes from the Portuguese Ilha Formosa, or beautiful island. The Western introduction to Taiwan came when Portuguese sailors were traveling the regional waters, and they came upon this island, and their observation of it was, wow, that's an Ilha Formosa. For a period of time after World War II, Formosa came to be known by a different moniker in the West, which was Free China, because of its position in the Cold War, which I'll talk about in a moment. Most recently, though, I think Taiwan has become increasingly associated with a problem. More and more we hear about either the Taiwan issue or the Taiwan problem. So the place I want to begin today is by talking about what makes Taiwan a problem, or what has caused it to be characterized as a problem in international relations. And I think the way we can begin to understand Taiwan, or the Taiwan problem, is to look at Taiwan as a territory and Taiwanese as a people caught in the Chinese Civil War. So that resolving the issue of Taiwan, figuring out what is Taiwan's fate, Taiwan's destiny, Taiwan's future, for many people is really a matter of resolving the problem, the lingering dilemma of the Chinese Civil War. So the two sides of the Chinese Civil War are the Chinese Communist Party, right? One antagonist in this civil war that lasted from the 1920s through the 1940s, off and on. The other side is the Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, the party that identifies itself with the Republic of China. So I'm going to start with the PRC's position. The People's Republic of China, led by the Chinese Communist Party, began in the Mao period with the position that the solution to the Taiwan problem was to liberate Taiwan, which is to say, to bring it by force if necessary, and I think they thought force was necessary, under the umbrella of the People's Republic of China. During the Deng Xiaoping era, so after about 1979, the PRC's position toward Taiwan changed to peaceful unification. So rather than we will forcibly overthrow the nationalist government in Taiwan and bring Taiwan under the PRC umbrella, the new policy after 1971 was the two sides working together peacefully will achieve the unification of China's historic territory. Most recently, we have had some evidence to suggest that the PRC's position has evolved beyond peaceful unification. There are tantalizing hints in the rhetoric of some PRC leaders that some kind of unification on the basis of equality between the two sides might be possible in the future. But the PRC's official policy on Taiwan and the official position that they bring to their interactions with the international community is Taiwan is part of China. the PRC government is the government of China, so Taiwan needs to be incorporated into the PRC, which is different from saying we could have unification as equals. So the and beyond part comes with a question mark. Okay, what does Taiwan want? What's the Taiwanese side of this equation? Well, back in the era of the Jiang family, Chiang Kai-shek, right, pictured here, next to the slogan, recover the mainland, the policy of the Taiwanese government was that the Republic of China government, led by the nationalist or Kuomintang party, was the sole legal government of China, that the communists had established the PRC in an illegal way through rebellion and force, and that the only solution to the Taiwan problem was for Taiwan to be, for the rest of China, in effect, to be incorporated into Taiwan, if you will, under the ROC label. Then in the 1980s, and especially in the 1990s, a new idea about Taiwan's future gained a lot of currency within Taiwan. It never became a majority position, but there came to be pretty widespread support in Taiwan for the idea that Taiwan should give up on this idea of being associated with or necessarily part of, in the past, present, or future, China, and should simply declare itself an independent nation. China, go your way, Taiwan, go our way, and not keep alive the prospect of some kind of future amalgamation of these two territories. Today, I think it's abundantly clear that what Taiwan citizens want is neither unification, the position advocated by the nationalists back in the 50s and 60s, 70s and 80s, and as by some of the Nationalist Party even today, nor independence, which was this idea that, you know, we should give up on unification altogether forever and rule it out completely. Instead, the preference of Taiwan citizens today is to keep things the way they are, which is to say separate, but not separated, but not divorced, right? We're not living together. We don't share a household. We're not even really sure we love each other anymore, but we're not signing that divorce paper because we don't want to rule out the possibility that maybe someday in the future we might be able to work something out. And this is, I think, the predominant position of Taiwanese today. All right, there is a third player in this drama of the Taiwan problem or the Taiwan issue, and that is the United States. And the United States, especially from the PRC's point of view, is really the key player. I mean, if you read what Chinese officials say about the Taiwan issue, they often describe it really as a problem in U.S.-China relations in which Taiwan is just a kind of pawn, and the real important players are the U.S. and Taiwan. So it's important to know what the U.S. position is. This is a statement by the State Department that spells out where to look for the answer. What is U.S. policy toward Taiwan? 3 communiques between the U.S. government and the PRC government, and a piece of domestic legislation called the Taiwan Relations Act define the parameters of U.S. policy. What do those documents say? The first and most important of these communiques was the one that Richard Nixon and Zhou Enlai basically promulgated back at the beginning of the rapprochement between the U.S. and the PRC that allowed us to normalize our relationship. And in that document, the U.S. says that we acknowledge that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait believe there's one China and Taiwan is part of it, and we're not challenging that position. So the U.S. doesn't agree to this position or disagree with this position. It simply acknowledges that this is what, at the time, in 1972, the governments of the ROC on Taiwan and the PRC on mainland China both believed. But the U.S. does say in its earliest policy statement on this issue. We want any resolution of this issue to be peaceful. In the Taiwan Relations Act, Congress created requirements for the president and for the U.S. government to make sure that peaceful resolution was the way the Taiwan issue would be addressed. So basically what the Taiwan Relations Act requires is it requires the U.S. government to maintain the ability to protect Taiwan. It does not promise to defend Taiwan. It simply requires that the U.S. government retain the capacity to defend Taiwan should that defense be deemed in the interest of the United States in some future conflict. President Bill Clinton further articulated what the U.S. position on this issue is, or he added to U.S. policy when he said that not only must this issue be resolved peacefully, but it should have the assent of the Taiwanese people. What President Clinton was acknowledging was that by the 1990s, Taiwan had become a democracy. And the prospect of government-to-government settlement against the will of the Taiwanese people was both inconsistent with Taiwan's political system and also unrealistic. That if you don't have Taiwan citizens buying into the resolution, then it will be a disaster for all concerned. So that's what President Clinton, I think, was getting at. So the result is that the U.S. has a policy which is usually characterized as strategic ambiguity, right? We are not going to tell you what we're going to do, because once we tell you what we're going to do, then you can make your own strategy based on a firm knowledge of how you will be, what you'll have to deal with based on the choices you make. Instead, the U.S. policy says, look, we're not going to tell you what we're going to do. We're not going to say we're on the Taiwan side. We're not going to say we're on the PRC side. We're going to say, work it out. As a parent, I am very familiar, as a parent, I should say, I have 2 children. I'm very familiar with this strategy, right? I'm not taking sides here, just work it out. Peacefully, and ideally with the assent of, all the Barbies involved in the conflict as well. So where does this leave us? One thing we know is that the world has changed, right, since President Clinton made his statements, and it's changed a lot since President Nixon and Zhou Enlai were negotiating back in the early 70s. China's economic, political, and military power and global influence are obviously increasing at a very rapid rate, and that is occurring in a context where the U.S. is increasingly stretched by its own financial and military commitments. Meanwhile, the relationship between Taiwan and the PRC has never been better. Since 2008, relations, economic, people-to-people, diplomatic, even military relations between Taiwan and the PRC have become much more favorable than ever before. So that leads to a question that many American policymakers and also people who contribute to policy debates have begun to ask. If this is the case, if the PRC is becoming more powerful, the U.S. is maybe becoming a little overextended in some ways, and Taiwan and the PRC are getting along, why should the U.S. continue to court trouble with Beijing, honestly, in order to assist Taiwan in resisting China's policy of unification? And I think that's a fair question to ask. But I have an answer, which is that I think helping Taiwan avoid unification against its will actually serves the interests not only of Taiwan, but also of the U.S., also of the larger world, but perhaps most controversially, I would argue, helping Taiwan resist premature unification against its will is also in the interests of the PRC. And just briefly to summarize the rest of this presentation, why Taiwan matters. Taiwan matters to the world as a model of economic development with equity, which is increasingly rare in the world we are in. Taiwan also matters to the world because it is a beacon of successful democratization without a great deal of social conflict or upheaval. Taiwan matters to the U.S. because it is a test case for American security commitments around the world. How we treat Taiwan is an indicator for our other allies, and also because Taiwan is in some sense a test case for the international implications or consequences of China's growing political and military power. I think resolving the Taiwan issue in a successful way matters to the PRC. And finally, and I want to argue kind of most importantly to me, Taiwan matters because it matters to its own people. And all people have a right to be taken seriously in their aspirations. So just quickly, Taiwan's miracle economy. This is something that I think most Americans and others are pretty familiar with. The way that Taiwan in the 1960s and 70s achieved a level of economic growth and development, industrialization, that put it on a level today with the developed world. So Taiwan people enjoy a standard of living. Actually, I heard just this weekend at a conference that if we use purchasing power parity to analyze GDP per capita, Taiwanese are actually earning more than Japanese today. So the fact that Taiwan was able to achieve this is, I think, an interesting and noteworthy accomplishment, and serves as a potential model or example to other developing countries. Today, Taiwan's economic miracle or miracle economy is most evident in Taiwan manufacturers' leading position in the high-tech manufacturing world, and also in the proliferation within Taiwan's economy, not only of large businesses, although there are some very large and globally significant firms, but also still the strong role that small and medium-sized enterprises play in Taiwan's economy. And this has always been a major factor in Taiwan's economic success, the proliferation of these very flexible and quickly adjusting small and medium-sized enterprises. So I think the economy is important. I think Taiwan's democratic achievement is also one worthy of global attention and perhaps emulation in the future. Back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Taiwan was a single-party dictatorship, and while Chiang Kai-shek's statue in his memorial in Taipei sits under the word democracy, there was in fact not very much democracy under Chiang Kai-shek. However, in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, Taiwan developed itself into a fully democratic country and society, so that today we're looking forward to elections on January 14th of this next year. In some ways, those elections are very exciting. I can't predict the outcome, so please don't ask me to. So it's very competitive. The population is very activated. The voter turnout will be very high. But in other ways, this election is pretty routine. I mean, Taiwan's been having presidential elections since 1996. Legislative elections, the presidential and legislative elections will occur together in 2012. Legislative elections since 1992. So the practice of democracy has become routine. I also think Taiwan matters because it is part of a global security architecture that has maintained stability in the international system. Not perfect stability by any means, but relative to the first half of the 20th century, for example, this post-World War II security environment has provided more stability and prosperity to the world's people than I think could realistically have been expected without it. So if we see the U.S.'s ability to sustain and support its allies around the world receding, either because of the rise of an alternative power or because of the decline of American power. I think what we risk is the dissolution of this security architecture, which I think has real costs for the whole world, both those who are in, among the bluey-purple countries on this map, and also for those who are not part of the U.S. network of alliances. So we often hear people say, if the U.S. were to allow Taiwan to be left to the PRC's devices, unprotected, undefended, incapable of defending itself, the message that sends to South Korea, to Japan, and to other U.S. allies around the world is we're back in what the realist IR theorists call, the self-help world. And the self-help world is pretty unfriendly especially to weaker countries. Finally, I want to argue that a failed unification attempt, and any unification attempt that happens without the assent of the Taiwan people is a failed unification attempt, would be a disaster for the PRC and for China, if we want to conceive of China as something larger than the PRC government or state alone, because it would be very hard for unification to happen successfully after a failure of unification because of a premature or coercive undertaking. And I think these statistics, which are from a 2008 survey in Taiwan, suggest where we stand relative to this question of what would constitute successful unification in Taiwan. We see that more than 60% of Taiwanese believe that if they could have independence, or if they could finalize the divorce, and it wouldn't create conflict with the PRC, it would be okay to do that. But 40% say, if we were the same, if we had the same political system, if the PRC were a democracy like Taiwan is, if we had the same social conditions and the same kind of economy, then we could be unified. And interestingly, about a quarter of Taiwanese can agree with both of these statements. So they are, when you ask the question, are you for unification or independence, a quarter of Taiwanese answer yes. Yes, I am. I am for unification or independence. So what that tells me is that it's not time for unification now, because the conditions are not right. But the possibility of some kind of relationship, meaningful relationship that could meet a standard of unification, that this is not impossible in the future. So that's why I think it's so important that the PRC not move too precipitously toward unification, because that may foreclose the possibility. That may take that agree to unification number from 38% down to 0. Finally, though, I want to talk about why Taiwan matters to the Taiwanese people, because I think ultimately, as I said before, all people deserve to be treated as ends in themselves, not simply as means to others' ends, whether they're ends of the United States and its allies or of the PRC. And I think where we get this kind of identity that Taiwanese might bring to the question of, who we are, that we should have our own fate, that we should have our own destiny, and that we should be regarded as a people with its own ends, is from its history. So Taiwan's history has shaped a society and culture on the island that is unique, that certainly incorporates aspects of Chinese identity, but is not fully captured by the idea of Chinese identity. This is the earliest settlers and inhabitants of Taiwan were what we call today the Aboriginal or Austronesian peoples, not people who came to Taiwan from China at all, but who came to Taiwan from other South Pacific islands. And they had their own societies, their own life in Taiwan for hundreds of years before the arrival of Chinese from the mainland, beginning in the late 1500s and continuing through the 19th century. The Chinese settlers quickly overtook the Aboriginal people, both in terms of territory and also in terms of population size and political power. But the Aboriginal people are still here. Then in 1895, Taiwan became a colony of the Empire of Japan. And I show you this picture because I had no idea that sumo wrestlers could be so skinny. But evidently in Japan, in Taiwan rather, the sumo teams were, you know, I'm sure, small but feisty. So 50 years of Japanese colonization also introduced to Taiwan another ingredient in the island's identity and culture that differentiates it from mainland China. And I think importantly also, those particular 50 years, 1895 to 1945, were the years in which Chinese nationalism in mainland China was born and consolidated. So it was during the 100 Days Reform, during the effort to revive the Qing dynasty, during the Xinhai Revolution, which is having its 100th anniversary this year, during the May 4th movement, during the founding of the Communist Party, during the Chinese Civil War, during the invasion and occupation of China by Japan, during the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, during all of this, Taiwanese were living under a Japanese colonial government and had very little awareness of what was happening in mainland China. And we're certainly not experiencing those traumatic events as something that could shape their identity as Chinese. Then in 1945, Taiwan becomes part of the Republic of China with the cession of the Japanese colonies back to their original owners or into independence. So the consequence of that experience historically of multiple layers of settlement, resettlement, colonization, recolonization, if you will, has been to create on Taiwan a culture that is certainly Chinese in many ways, but is also significantly local and specific to Taiwan, and also, in contrast in many ways to other parts of China, global. And that, I think, is manifested in Taiwan's high culture. So someone like Lin Huaimin, probably the foremost choreographer and dance impresario in all of East Asia, Lin Huaimin has specifically said, my work is influenced by my background as a Chinese, inseparable from my life as a Taiwanese, and also accessible to and motivated by the global and universal language and idiom of modern dance. So he refuses to be categorized as Chinese, as Taiwanese, or as global, because Taiwan is all three. And we see that in low culture, in I shouldn't say low culture, there might be anthropologists in the room. Popular culture as well. Lotus Wong, and she's way over 3.5 million hits by now, but since about 500,000 of them are me, and I haven't updated the slide, Lotus Wong with this wonderful video that I recommend to you, in which the iconography of the song is entirely Chinese. The song itself is a cover of a Korean pop song, so participating in this kind of global popular culture. but is entirely Taiwanese in its sensibility and also in its language. The song is sung in the Minnan dialect, the Taiwanese local dialect, and if you like download the lyrics, even if you're a fluent speaker of Mandarin, it still doesn't make any sense to you because it's all of this vernacular in Taiwanese that doesn't work in any other language. The song is about being a sort of middle-aged woman, still seeking a husband, going to the temple and praying for a little of that kind of luck. And then most recently, I came across another YouTube video, which to me just completely captures youth culture in Taiwan, which is all about seeking visibility for this unique identity of Taiwan people. So this is a young Taiwanese guy who is putting on the costume of San Taizi, the third prince, and traveling around the world, dancing with people in very deprived settings. So not so much in Egypt. When he went to Egypt, he went to the pyramids and the Temple of Luxor and things. But in Kenya, he visited slums in Nairobi, rural areas on the savannah, and in the video, in the one where he's dancing, he also danced in India, but when he's dancing in Egypt and Kenya, he says, I could not just stand by and watch my country, Taiwan, get bullied internationally. I want people to know that there's a country called Taiwan and what an amazing place it is. So here is a young man acting out, right, the desire to be simultaneously Chinese, San Taizi, every Chinese recognizes San Taizi, but also Taiwanese. San Taizi, you notice, is wearing the ROC flags on the back of his costume, and also global. So, in conclusion, I would say there's no question that cross-strait relations are strong, stronger than they have ever been. I would argue never in history has the amount of communication, cooperation, transportation, and activation between mainland China and Taiwan come close to what it is today. But for Taiwanese, Taiwan is still the heart of their collective enterprise. So, for example, the Mainland Affairs Council chairwoman, Lai Xingyuan, said recently, Taiwan is a democratic country. Any official position concerning the future of cross-strait relations must have the support of public opinion and be based on social consensus. Taiwan's future should be decided by its democratically and freely exercised choice of its 23 million citizens. So we see on her official webpage, so this is the homepage of the Mainland Affairs Council, that we are invited to open the main door, 开大门, go to the mainland, right? So 大陆. But why are we opening the door? Why are we going to the mainland? Because we want to 以台湾为主, put Taiwan first, 对人民有利, for the benefit of the people. Then the door god, right, another figure from Chinese popular religion who is ubiquitous in Taiwan, the door guide says, 门打开, the door is open. Then what does he say, right? He's speaking Taiwanese in the second part of the phrase, 王够处. We are guarding the house. We, Taiwanese, are guarding the house. So what I would say is that for a century, from 1895 to 1990 or so, Taiwan really turned its back to the mainland, turned its back to the west, turned its face first north toward Japan, then east toward the US. But today, Taiwan is facing west again, and this is the mouth of Kaohsiung Harbor, which overlooks the Taiwan Strait. Taiwanese are looking toward mainland China for more and more of their present and more of their future. So I think the future then for Taiwan and for the PRC has many possibilities. And that makes reaching an outcome that serves the interests of all parties both possible and ever more important. So with that, I will put up the shameless self-promotion. There we are. And